All right. Greetings and welcome back once again. This is Amuna, and you don't know already. I pray everybody is doing well. You see it correctly on the screen. I'm going to briefly share some of my findings as I've been recently, coming back to my remembrance that something probably needs to be fine tuned with this conversation that we were having around, the No Woman No Cry book, the movie, and all of those things. So there was a time period recently that I saw, like it was a little hazy, and there people were asking some questions about this time period. So I said, you know what, let me go back and see what the book says, right? So all of the stuff that I'm coming, I don't know any of these people personally. So the stuff, you mean the main characters in this particular story. And so I had to go back and said, let me go back and read Rita's account again, because at first when I read it, like everybody else, if you've never read it, it's a lot of stuff. And you didn't really know the players and you didn't know who they were referencing, although the names were there. So without further ado, I'm going to backtrack a little bit because I think these years, and I meant to put it on here, between 1968 and 1972 are the Manisha, welcome to the conversation. Are the JAD years, right? These are the years that he is signed to JAD Records with Johnny Nash and Donnie Sims. Now, Donnie Sims comes in the Marley documentary, but once again, when you're watching it, you don't even realize, right? Cynthia, good evening, blessings. Welcome to the conversation. So I said, let me go over it and share my findings on some of these years. I actually found a blog post as well from one of the musicians when he was overseas, right? And it makes sense, Jerry, welcome, to what Rita was talking about, right? So I'm going to backtrack and read his book, and then I'm going to read along. So let's just call this 102. When we first did it, it was 101, and now this is 102, okay? So this is verse. This is page 60. I'm reading from No Woman No Cry, and then again, Jeremiah, welcome to the conversation. And then I'm going to go over some of my findings, right? Because the question is, where was he 67, 68, 69, and 70, 71, 72, really from 68 to 72, right? So it says here, Sadella was about 7 months old when Bob decided he'd had enough of staying at Auntie's. So if Sadella was 7 months and she was born 67 of August, okay? September, October, November, December, January, February, March. This is March of 68, okay? He felt like a parasite and said like a boy and not like the man he wanted to be at 23. And we could confirm it. Like I said, I'm going to go over this one a little bit slower here. We could confirm it that if he's born in 1945, then 23 would make him, it would make the year 1968, right? So we were good in that. Let's continue. He felt he should take up his responsibilities and move his family out. He didn't feel to express himself, to curse. He would never curse around Auntie. So he was feeling that by this point, how many children do they have? Sadella is born and Sharon is there and Ziggy is not yet born. Spoiler alert, she's pregnant. Okay. So I had to give like the preface before we get to the New Deal, because I thought when I would look back at it, I'm like, it's important to know what preceded some of these deals that they were getting into, right? And at this point, they under pressure financially. Besides, she had moved us from the main house and built a little room for us in the front. And Bob said, you know what this means? Auntie herself wants us to go now. That was what he thought, of course. I myself wasn't sure, since she was my right hand. So for those who was like, I don't know what you're talking about, I read this story earlier this year. And so this is just zooming in on a specific time point. They're living at Auntie's house. Auntie is Rita's aunt. Her mother has gone off and married someone else. Her father is in England, and this is the only, and her and the family that she has, right? So now that she got pregnant early at 18, and now she's 2.5 children in, and they're feeling they're not able, she didn't finish school, Bob didn't finish school, and so they don't have any gainful income, okay? And they want to make it big in the music industry. It says, but I understood his position, and we decided to find a room with a shop. A room like ours at Auntie that was a shop by day and a bedroom by night. Didn't work with children. Besides, though, Bob thought having 2 daughters was great. He wanted a son. Just like most Jamaican men do, it seems to me. Okay. So with 2 babies and the prospect of another one soon, and the prospect, she's pregnant because I looked it up, and what's his name? What's his name again? Y'all help me, because once I come out of one study, then all the information kind of gets shelved. David Ziggy Marley. He's born in 1968. So him and his sister, he's born October of 68, and his elder sister is just born 1 year and 2 months before him. So by this time, March, that they're trying to move out, she's already pregnant. She would have to have already been pregnant since January. And this probably was where the pressure was coming from, because she didn't want Auntie to really style her, right? It says here, so with 2 babies and the prospect of another one, we began looking all over, and though it wasn't easy, we eventually found a room off of Walton Park Road with a shop front that adjoined, where we could sell our records. It's amazing to me to look back at the person I was then. It's only now that I realize how young and inexperienced I was going through all those changes and responsibilities and dealing with them quite normally. I'm surprised that I didn't wake up one morning and run from it all. So when I was first reading it, like I said, I wasn't paying attention to these specific details, right? Which becomes important later. So that's why I'm calling attention to it now. Welcome to those who just joined us. So she keeps saying there's something repetitive in her narrative, is the pressure, the financial pressure in over her head. There's some in Trench Town, in poverty, dependent. There's something that is gnawing at her, and it is pervasive throughout the entirety of her book, right? So then she goes in to talk about how she moved in with a lady who knew the auntie, and how her and Bob was fighting, but I ain't going into all that right now. And then how Bob wanted to beef with her because she didn't make no food, this, that, and the third. So let me go ahead and jump down here. And she goes on to talk about how marriage was difficult, and at this time, they were struggling, right? That's important to know. Page 63. As for Auntie and the question of where they would live, all that had to put on hold. Wait, no, I think they moved from the lady's house. They moved from the lady's house. So now it says here, as for Auntie and the question of where we would live, all that had to be put on hold for the time being, at least. Soon enough, the records the Wailers were making from Studio One, as well as Waylon Solon Productions, and the airplay they got made them a star again in Jamaica. So this would have to be the year of 68. It says the Solets group began to go on little dates, overnight gigs in North Coast to Bournemouth Beach, to Cuba, to Caribbean places like Gold Coast Beach and St. Thomas. And there was Auntie, who was always had my back, was back, and was agreeably became the nanny. No way could she have done that if they didn't have her. And Bob, even with his misgivings, knew this too, and loved being there for us. She says, but I realized also that I had taken up too much responsibility too soon. How could we have missed this? It is a lot, you know what I'm saying? Under a lot of pressure. By the time she was 22, she had 2 children and still hadn't left Trenchtown. Okay. She felt bad about the possibility of their growing up in an environment that didn't seem as if it was going to change. Poverty, corruption, violence, everything around them was the same as it had always been. Bob saw that she wasn't going to be laying back, accepting the situation as it was, accepting anything that happened. Quote, I don't care. I'm going to sleep today. How could I let this be my children's future? So Rita is in a state of duress, according to her own words, right? Not trying to find a way out. They have been doing music. She met Bob, 2 years ago? And within the 2 years, she's on her second child with him and third child all together, right? So, and no money and no job, right? And singing in the studio, okay? She says, I thought to that. Every day she'd say, what's gonna be? What's gonna happen? Let's make something happen. And she became what she guessed you'd call a quiet storm. So if she's thinking this to herself, you know she's pressing him. What's gonna be? What's gonna happen? What happened to the picnic them? We sit down in here with their trench stone, we in an anti yard, we not no money, where them are gonna yam, where them, right? So we're paying attention to this part. We're paying attention to this part. On the surface, you're smiling, but underneath you boil. And when you have to, you roar. Who was she roaring at? Because when we hear the videos of her and when we see her, she's not roaring, right? So this is the condition. This is the preface to the New Deal that they end up in, right? So sometimes, when I was talking the other day about not being desperate when you go into transactions, not being hungry when you go into the grocery store, because when one does, you overlook things. When one does, you don't read the fine print. When one does, you buy now, pay later, because you just want something to happen, right? And so this spirit of desperation in her narrative, retrospectively, I could definitely now see where they were, not just because I'm inferring it, because she said it, right? So let's continue. Let's continue. This is chapter 5. Lively up yourself. Okay. And then I'm we're gonna stop and show the screen. If you had been listening to Jamaican music in late 60s, you'd have heard Burning Spear, Jimmy Cliff, Hortense Ellis, Marcia Griffiths, and certainly the Soulettes and the Wailers. One person with the air out for all this was the American soul singer Johnny Nash. And that's why I put this guy right here on the screen, because this is, someone shared this picture from a session, I believe it's overseas in London, with Johnny Nash and Bob Marley. So these are the years. The question was, where was he during certain years? 68, 69, 70, 71, 72. So we're trying to see if, there's a little piece here and a little piece there of where they were and what he was doing. So let's continue. It says, if you have been listening to Jamaica music, I already read that. It says one person was Johnny Nash. So let's read a little bit about Johnny Nash before we continue, because he's an important figure in the conversation. I've heard the name, but let's do what we do, which is study, so that we can be informed. So let me share my screen here. How many people know about the Johnny Nash story or the saga, or am I just late to the party? Let me know if I'm late to the party now. But there's so many names being dropped here, there, and everywhere. Okay, so let's read a little bit about Johnny Nash before we continue with Rita's storyline. All right. So it says here, Johnny Lester Nash Jr. was an American singer born August 19, 1940. So he would be 5 years older than Bob, 6 years older than Rita. Best known in the United States for a 1972 hit, I Can See Clearly. You know that song? I can see clearly now, the rain is gone. Didn't know it was him. I could see all obstacles in my way. Yeah, but they said that was a cover song, but nonetheless, primarily a reggae and pop singer, he was one of the first non-Jamaican artists to record reggae music in Kingston. Okay? So essentially, he was born in Houston. He sang in the choir. You can definitely read it. And he was making, like they said, he had motion in the United States. He had motion, okay? He signed to ABC Paramount, and made his major label debut in 1957. So 10 years, a good 10 years before they get in contact with Bob, Johnny Nash is in America. And remember, the Wailers and certain musicians were listening to American music in Jamaica at the time, right? They were doing cover songs and listening to people. So the chances of them knowing who this person is great because they were covering American music. And actually, Bob and the Wailers started by, the Shiny Shoots and covering American music. It says, where we at? He had his first chart hit in early 1958 with a cover of Doris Day's A Very Special Love. Everybody was covering everything. Marketed as a rival to Johnny Mathis, because they always got to pit people against each other. Nash also enjoyed success as an actor early in his career, appearing in the screen version of playwright Louis S. Patterson's Take a Giant Step, 1959. So Nash is out here. He got an early start, right? Well, as it relates to this conversation, we're going to skip down. 1960. Nash sang the theme song to the syndicated animated series The Mighty Hercules, which ran on television stations for 3 years, from 63 to 66. In 64, Nash and manager Danny Sims formed JAD Records in New York. JAD released the Cow Seal single, All I Really Want to Be Is Me, although JAD filed for bankruptcy after 2 years. So by 66, that record company files for bankruptcy. Nash and Sims moved on to marketing America's singers to Jamaica. And the backstory, is important. Owing to the low cost of recording in that country. In 1965, Nash had top 5 hit in the U.S. R&B chart, Let's Move and Groove Together. Right? So boom, boom, boom. Jump down a little bit. We're going to pop back over here. So that's a little bit about Nash. So let's see, as Rita goes on to talk about Danny Sims. She says here that one person with the ear out for this was the American soul singer Johnny Nash. We just read a little bit. A frequent visitor to Jamaica who was looking for material for his company, JAD Records. So we now see that they formed a new company. By the time they meet them in 1966, 67, the first company went defunct and they started another one. Okay. So it says here, in January 1967, at a Rastafarian religious ceremony, Rasta Elder Mortimer Planner introduced Nash to Bob, recommending him as the best, quote, songwriter I know, end quote. Nash obviously agreed with Planner's assessment because later he told his business partner, Danny Sims, that every one of the 20-odd songs Bob played for him that night could be a hit. So let's pause for a second. Because Johnny Nash, according to the story, and Danny Sims are who forms JAD Records, right? So let's go over to JAD Records. So that the story come to life. So this year, Rita is saying they met them in 1967. Remember, she just told us that they're under pressure, JAD. And by 1967, January, she would have already been pregnant or about to be pregnant because wait, this is 1967. No. In 1967, January, yes, she's pregnant, but she's pregnant with Sedella. Am I wrong on that? No, Sedella is born in 67, August. No, she's either about to be pregnant with or already pregnant with Ziggy. My bad. Because 60, no, I'm bugging. Why am I saying crazy stuff? No, 67. She's already pregnant. Sorry, it is with Sedella because Sedella is born August of 67, according to the records. So if she born August of 67, 9 months before that, she would already been pregnant before that. So my bad. Because they were so close together, it had me tripped up for a second. Wanna sit with me. Let's continue. Welcome to those who have just joined us. Welcome. Like, I like to spread my topics around. I like to give it time to breathe, you know what I'm saying? So that when I'm coming I'm coming authentically to explore the records as opposed to just, you know what I mean, just coming on here and doing extra stuff. I'm not that type of YouTuber. Before that, me just go read my book in a silence. You know what I mean? But for this purpose, it's where were they around these years from 67 to 72. So that's what we're doing, right? So thank you for those who just joined us. JAD Records. Formed in 1967, JAD Records was a record label that was co-owned by Johnny Nash, Arthur Jenkins, and businessman Donnie Sims, whose initial formed its logo, JAD. JAD Records was the label which signed Bob Marley, Peter Tosh, Bunny Wailer, and Rita Marley. So remember, before this time, they're over recording for Cox and Dodd, but they're having problems with Cox and Dodd, according to the story, because of the money thing. So they decide to make Whalum Solum press their own stuff and release their own stuff. So now they're back at this. Well, it's a new record label, right? Because it just formed when they got met. So now they're looking to try to continue to push their music, because at this point, what other options are they having? Oh, let me finish getting a little backtrack. Bob comes back in the latter part of 66, right? Which will be around November of 66. I have to go into my old memory bank of this whole storyline. November of 66, around the time, would have had to be around the time Sadella is conceived, because 9 months later, or 10 months later, it's August, right? So so by this time, there's no motion. He came back from America. They keep saying he came back from America because he missed Jamaica, but we went over that. If you missed that one, check that one out, where we have the declassified immigration paperwork that says that he had to leave the country voluntarily because he messed up his visa status. Okay, that's what the paperwork said. But let's continue. Whew. It says here, they were signed to an exclusive long-term contract as recording artists from 68 to 72. And that's why we're looking at this time period from 68 to 72. Okay? Because stuff is moved around during this time. And in recent times, a lot of these paperwork is coming to the surface. Like I found something I'm going to share. And I was like, what? Okay. It's just like 30, 40 years ago coming to the surface, right? Anyway. It says here, other notable artists to sign with the label is Johnny Nash himself, Byron Lee, and Neville Willoughby, and later Jimmy Cliff. Okay, good. So that's a little background on that. That's a little background on JAD. It's very short, but let's read. Danny Sims had passed away in 2012. So let's read a little bit about, I was trying to see who had some information. I know I still didn't get another copy. I got the audio, but the person reading the audio for Catch a Fire is annoying me. I tried to listen to it more than one time. I'm like, his voice, I don't know what it is. It's annoying me. So now I'm gonna have to get the book, because I was trying to squeeze in the audio, but the voice of the guy, I don't know who is reading. But I'm not saying he's reading bad. I'm just saying I can't listen to it for long. So anyway, Danny Sims, impresario with Bob's connection, who managed Bob Marley early in his career. So before Bob signed to Island Records in 1972, he had written or recorded 200 songs for Donnie Sims. Some people say it was 72. Some people were saying it was 80. This article is saying it is 200. An African-American with mafia connections who discovered him in Kingston in 1967. I thought that was curious. I said, huh? Because a little bit that I saw in the other book was saying the same thing, that the monies, which was customary, that managers would get their resources from other sources. And someone else who attests to this is Don Taylor. Don Taylor, right? Cynthia says, you're not alone. Oh, thank you. She said he breaks into an accent. Thank you. He does. He throws me off every time. I'm like, what? Guy, what is going on? And it's not a good accent either. But Don Taylor says in Marley and Me on page 45 that He said, I'm just going to cut to the chase. He says, this experience, meaning he was managing some people, right, exposed him to the intricacies of the music scene. And he gained access to the world of the mafioso, with whom, like all managers, he became closely associated, with many of whom he developed a lasting friendship. So that's what Don Taylor is saying about the role of a manager and kind of the line that they had to toe in the music industry. Okay. I don't know. I wasn't there. This is what the report is saying. So it goes on to say these tunes included Stir It Up, which brought Marley his first international success, recorded by Johnny Nash, Sims's protege, who had a number of big selling records in the United States. The song was a top 20 in the UK and the US in 1972. So the storyline goes is that Bob is working with them, but they're kind of shelving him. It's kind of like people's testimony when they get onto a new record labels. They don't really know what to do with the artist, but he's helping writing. He's helping promote the main artist. And we saw that Johnny Nash has a 10-year start. He already has some motion in the industry. And so they're using the Wailers to kind of bolster Johnny Nash's career. This is what I'm getting from the storyline. Okay. It says here, let me jump down a little bit. It says that recognizing Marley's songwriting talents, Sims put the Jamaican on a retainer of $100 a week. Good money at the time, especially in Jamaica. So that's curious because I keep hearing I hear it's $50, I hear it's $100, but we're going to read a little bit more about what Rita says. Because again, what was Rita's issue? By the hook or the crook. Her issue was, look, man, there ain't no money flowing. All these children are here. They're living on auntie. All of them just doing music. It's not just Bob. There's no motion happening and money need for run. Okay. Would that have been the impetus for them to sign the deal? I don't know. But usually when people just start off, this is they end up signing bad deals, right? It says here, so let's pause right there. So that's a little bit about Danny Sims. I mean, there's more. Let's jump down. Born in Mississippi, Danny Sims was raised in Chicago and New York, intelligent, funny, and sophisticated. And I didn't know this till just now. I did the research. He married Beverly Johnson, the first Black American to appear on the Vogue cover. I was like, Beverly Johnson, isn't that the model lady? And sure enough, it was. So look at that. Sims profited in the entertainment business largely with Black acts, but he also managed Paul Anka, a former teenage star turned immensely successful storm songwriter. My Way was his tune. Okay. Sims had an additional career in the propriety of the Sapphires, the first Black Midtown Manhattan supper club. He never tried to hide his associations with the funders, right? With the Jamaican boys who would come to America and get into trouble. I was always the guy they called. Sims told me, discussing narcotics. This is a quote, y'all, that they was able to reach out to the guys they was friendly with and kept the bad Americans away from them to let them do their stuff without bothering them. You mentioned Danny Sims' name in New York in the white or Black community, and people left you alone. Interesting. It goes on to say, the writer and Marley archivist Roger Steffens confirmed this. Danny's connections were no secret, he said. He admitted to him that his partner in JAD Records for decades was Joe Armani, head of one of the biggest crime families in America. And he's quoting that he's a mobster. He told him proudly more than once. So the funder passed away in 1992. And basically, you can read more about it. So I found that interesting. They go on to say that Sims said he and Johnny Nash left America for Jamaica to escape the alphabet wise. When Nash, I don't know what's up with all of this stupid ads. When Nash, what shot me there? Had a R&B US number one in 1966. Remember, Rita says they met them in January of 1967. There's another article, or it's in the book, I think I'm going to show it to you, where it's asserted that Danny Sims went back and forth to Jamaica since the early 60s. So eventually they decide to stay when he leaves America. It says, let's move together. The record company radicalized a radio commercial for the release by adding the words "Burn Baby Burn" at the time of Watts, Chicago, and Detroit riots. He, quote, the boys called him and said, "Danny, they finally got you." He thought they were going to deal with him, but the Alphabet Boys, for inciting a riot, as they called it, they got on a plane to Jamaica. So that's the official story of how he got to Jamaica and why he decides to do recordings there, right? Which would put them in January of 1967 in the groundation ceremony with Rasta Elder Mortimer Planner. That's what would put them at that spot. In Kingston, Sims moved into an uptown property. Nash's songs developed a Jamaican sense. He was the first international artist to regularly co-opt Jamaican rhythms, exemplified by the rock-steady feel of his 1969 hit with a version of Sam Cooke's Cupid. Oh, Cupid, let down your bow and let your arrow. I could hear it. Straight to your. I could hear it. It was Nash who found himself in Trenchtown on the 7th of January, 1967. So we have some cross reference. I don't know if they're getting it from Rita or what, but she says in January 1967, at a Rastafarian religious ceremony, Rasta Elder Mortimer Planner introduced Nash to Bob, right? So the article in the Independent is also saying that, and they're given more specific, it was the 7th of January. Okay. It was the 3rd of September. It was Nash who found himself in Trenchtown on the 7th of January, 1967, at a Rastafarian groundation before a blazing fire. Bob Marley sang a number of his songs. So what I did find, which I found interesting, is one of these ceremonies that takes place 2 years later. So we could kind of get a feel for what Johnny Nash walked into. Now, I'm not going to be able to play the whole thing, but we could take a look real quick. How about that? So we could get a feel. Lala, welcome to the conversation. So we could get a feel of what he walked into on the 9th, or on the 7th of January, 1967, right? It's here on YouTube. I'm going to share my screensies. Make sure you guys can see. I was doing a little homework. I was like, oh, timeline. Because you got so many dates and so many people, and ain't like, who, what, when, huh? There's a lot of things going on. Anywho, so here is a little, this is 1969. So this one won 2 years later, but Mortimer Planner is leading this one as well. So let's take a look. See? Mortimer Planner, the Dungu, Kingston, Jamaica, August the 5th, 1960. So this is, sorry, it would have been similar to what was going on 2 years prior.
Ethiopia, the land of forefathers.
I'm sorry, why is this locked into my core memory? The minute he starts singing, I remember Celebration in the outside. Let's continue.
The land where all God loves to be.
So it would have been similar. We're not saying that Bob is at the 1969 one, because this is August of 1969. And I think, according to the record, he may, there's some stuff that shows you where he is. So, but by that time, he would have been signed to the JAD records. But let's listen just a little bit more. You see the people around, you see them beating the drum, and you see him leading the procession.
So I saw them thy children now gather to thee. All
right, boom. So I just wanted to share that a little bit. That's on YouTube if you want to take a look at it. Welcome to those who just joined us. So now we're getting a better picture. Now let's go back and read Now we can understand, at least I can understand. Hopefully, it sheds some clarity on the condition that they were in and the first opening of chapter 5, right? If you had been, so she says here, the American soul singer Johnny Nash, a frequent visitor to Jamaica who looked for material for his company, JAD Records, which we just learned he just formed it. So they're probably like, for whatever reason, they get out of Dodge, right? For whatever reason, they leave America. We don't know the reason. I wonder, right? And so now they're like, yo, let's go in this direction. They tapping in to what's going on the island. And he just forms this new record label. So now they're looking for talent. They're looking for the acts. All right. And it goes on to say, It goes on to say, in January 1967, at a Rastafarian religious ceremony, Rasta elder Mortimer Pallet introduced Nash to Bob. But according to what we just read, Bob would have been singing. He would have been, right? So they would have been like, ooh, who's this guy? Right? We just heard Mortimer singing, but Bob, you would have been like, oh, his voice is unique. Right? It says here, Nash obviously agreed with Plano's assessment because later he told his business partner Danny Sims that every one of the 20-odd songs Blood played for him that night could be a hit. Neville Willoughby, so I had to look him up. Where's that up? He apparently was a radio broadcaster. But according to something I read somewhere else, he was the son of Danny Sims's lawyer. So Danny Sims had a lawyer, and Neville Willoughby was the guy on the radio. So let me share a little, which would be important at this time because it's the people who are playing the radio who is going to allow your music to go through, right? Trying to look for the shorter one here. Okay, I'll just read it really quickly. Willoughby wrote a book, Jamaica Boy, which recalls the late 1960s in Jamaica, and which, according to him, started out as an academic paper on the recording industry in Jamaica in the late 60s, but turned out to be a racy, raunchy story. Hey, I never hear about that one yet. Hold on there. Of an American pop singer who comes to Jamaica to record reggae and meets a popular Jamaican disc jockey. Hold on there, people. Oh, no, no, wait. The veteran broadcaster was, however, best known internationally. So who am I talking about? Johnny Nash. For his interviews with the late reggae Bob Marley from 1973 and in 1978, shortly before Marley started his global climb and his famous peace concert. The most popular of his interviews, the 1973 one, was eventually released on CD and has become one of the best media insights in Marley's early views. So we might have to take a look at that one at the next day. And I'm about to go on Amazon right now and see if Jamaica Boy is still there. So this guy is a central figure that Rita is mentioning in this opening chapter. But if we never did it, how are we supposed to know? Hold on there. Jamaica Boy. Let me see if this is about. I looked at another article about him. I didn't see this one. Hold on. Oh, that was 1981. Currently unavailable. 316 pages. Where am I talking about in this book? Yeah. Hey, I've said it. Anywho, let me continue. Let me not get distracted. That is for another day. I'll look for that thing as well. So anywho, let's continue. Where I'm at, 38 minutes. So it goes on to say Neville Willoughby, one of Jamaica's leading radio personalities, had also recommended Bob to Johnny Nash because we saw that they were playing locally as well at that time, right? It says, so when Nash and Danny Sims came to Jamaica looking for us later that year, so later in 1967, they were already ready and interested. You never see the paperwork yet. You never see the contract yet. But guess what? This is looking like the only the only viable option. You already done got bit bus in the Caribbean. You're already singing Simmer Down. You're already singing at Cox and Dad. You're already singing for Leslie Kong, right? Or maybe that comes a little later. But no money is coming. So after the first thrill of, oh my goodness, I'm recorded, falls off, it's like, okay, where is the money? Right? So no money. By this time, his first recording was in 62, and now we're in 67. So 5 years has passed, right? 2 years for Rita and 5 years for Bob, and no money now run. So she's saying us, she's telling us. But by the time they came around looking for them again, them did ready. And it says, which part would I know? Now we thought at least something good is going to happen. At that point, they really needed something because life seemed at a standstill. And I've said this up before and I'll say it again from personal experience. It is dangerous in this time to make life altering choices because sometimes we head not clear. And even though you're going to make a choice, because any choice you make, inactivity or activity is going to lead to something. Sometimes outside conversation and good counsel is helpful, especially if you're not in the position. Like, read it over, make sure. But she said it's whatever. At this time, they was ready to get something popping. Okay. Sharon was still too young for school. Sadella was still in Pampers, which, because by 67, one born 64. So by 67, you have a 3-year-old and a baby. Sadella was still in Pampers, which I had to wash every day. So she was in nappy, cloth diapers. I don't know what made me one time. I want to think I was going to do cloth diapers. Boy, oh boy. I mean, in the long run, it's helpful, right? But yeah, them washing them cloth diapers is something. So anyway, it says, and we were still at 18A Greenwich Park Road, all of us in that one little room at Auntie. So it's she, Bob, Sharon, Sadella, and the baby in the belly. Give thanks for some place to be, right? It says, and soon there be one more of us, because she was pregnant with her third child, hoping for the son they had asked Jah for. Pressure, under pressure. So it says, yet once again, we had to thank Auntie, because at least they had a home with a veranda. True? Where we could entertain these Americans. When they arrived, as usual, she liked all the attention and excitement and was happy to bring out drinks and crackers and cheese. So Auntie said, what? Then come back. It says, and I had someone there to help me look after the children, so I didn't have to feel pressured to be the singer, hostess, the mother all at once. After they started to work for JAD. So boom, according to this storyline, this is when they come to set the New Deal later this year in 1967. If the storyline is to be believed, later this year in 1967, she's pregnant, they under pressure, and they met him earlier that year. And when he was coming around the second time, they already discussed it, right? They had to have already agreed that this is what they were going to do. Whether they saw the contract, I don't know. But later on, we see that the contract, let me see, where did I see the contract? The contract had within it that JAD Records basically owned the masters, which is mostly the contract that people was getting at that time. Right? That they would own the masters and that they put them on retainer. So let me continue here. Where am I? It says, after we started to work for JAD and began to see USD, so they was like, them need to work for JAD because them wanted to see USD. For the first time, I said, Auntie C, making good money now, good money coming in. And so her story changed somewhat. Not when people asked about me, she'd say, "Oh, she turned out not as we wanted, but thank God she's not the worst." Americans can speak. They give you a picture on the wall. So now after they signed the deal, remember we was talking about destiny the other day, and I did a series of videos about destiny swaps and how it is that this is the life you have, right? But that may be the life you want. And sometimes you enter into these, not sometimes, the majority of the times you have to give up something. You enter into these contracts, and in the beginning, like she says, the American is talking it up. In the beginning, it sounds good, especially when you're hungry. Where you would eat when you're hungry? You wouldn't necessarily eat when you have choices, right? So I'm gonna wind down in a second and come back at a later date. But she says here, so going in, she was hyped. But then she says, Americans can speak. They give you a picture on the wall that looks great. So now to me, this is reading like remorse. This is reading like, again, she's writing this book some 20 something years later, or almost 30 years later, right? But in retrospect, she's saying basically to me, because the way Rita writes is kind of in and out sometimes. It's not going straight the way she writes, right? So she's saying Americans can basically, they got finessed. They give you a picture on a wall that looks great. We were enticed by the prospect that our life was finally going to change. So she said it, and I realized it because I had highlighted it in my book. They got finessed. Okay. Here was what we'd been waiting for. People who could take us from one level to another. And at the beginning, this seemed to be true because our initial meeting with JAD, people took place in a house that Johnny Nash owned in the mountains overlooking Kingston in Russell Heights. So she was like, of course we believed it. They took us to the spot. We saw their house. It was in the mountains. He had money, and we believed what they were saying. And they had reason to believe it, like she told us. And we don't even have to read into it. She told us they wanted to believe it, right? But they already had an experience on the ground with their own people, right? So maybe they're figuring, these people come from America. And sometimes people in the islands, or sometimes people in other countries, idolize America. Not, and thinking, oh, it's streets paved of gold, when in reality it's smoke and mirrors to a certain degree. Not to say that some places people are not living how it's portrayed, but the people who usually portray that they're living a certain way are really not. And based on what we learned, they started JODA Records in 65 or 60, what is it, 65? And in 2 years, like we were just read, according to the narrative, the record company was bankrupt. So this record company that they just started when they got to Jamaica, or right before they came in 67, really did it really have resources to do all the things that they promised? They never in them pocket. But I have reason to believe, based on reports later on, that they run out of resources. Well, let's continue. And hopefully this is giving those who have questions about this particular timeline a little bit more clarity about it. It says here, she says, our first visit to a house on the hilltop, breathtaking. So imagine somebody taking you to a place that's in your own country that you have never been, right? And they're young, and they're hungry, and they've been at this for some time. Okay. I'm gonna stop right there. We'll come back because we are at 48 minutes. I'm gonna stop right there because it's going to show us a little bit more about this new deal that they got, and why these years are very important to the overall discussion, and when the things that we can learn from their experiences. Like, if we don't learn anything from their experiences, we are just like trying to come for tea. You know what I mean? If we don't learn or pass anything on to our children to learn from the experiences that they shared. I'm gonna share this link really quickly. I'll be back and talk a little bit more about this time period because I found it curious once I went back and read over some things. So that groundation ceremony is interesting. I'm put the YouTube link for that in the box. I'm gonna look and see if I can find Jamaica Boy because that's curious. Where is that book? Where is that book? So if you want to tune in and share your thoughts on that, let me know if you knew, if you didn't know. Yeah. Do. And the next time we're gonna come and talk about when he goes now, and these just were found not recently, within the last few years, these tapes that he did in 1968 reemerged, right? And so they did start, it would seem like they were having motion because they were sent to America and they were doing things that would lead them to believe, okay, we finally made it, right? So we'll take a look at that probably tomorrow. If anybody has anything to say, feel free to share. If not, we'll go ahead and play this commercial in the meantime. And then like, subscribe, and share the video, by the way, everyone. And then we'll be back. We already know what to do to support the channel. Like, subscribe, and share. That is free. But if you want to support the work beyond all of the information, all of the knowledge, the deep research that I drop, my passion is giving back to the community, educating on all fronts. And I have this campaign up. If you would like to support, scan the GoFundMe so that I can bring these health education classes to children in the state. Also, if you just want to go ahead and be like, I just want to cash app you, go ahead and cash app the Yummy Cottage, And again, PayPal, for those like, I don't have PayPal or I don't have Cash App. Listen, you can Cash App it, PayPal, or you can just go over to the yummycottage.com and we have a donate button there as well. In addition to that, you already know, published author, go onto Amazon and purchase a book. Purchase Island Twist. Purchase Angry Black Woman Syndrome Revisited. You can purchase a book, gift it to a loved one, and those are all of the ways that you can support the channel. Thank you for tuning in. Now, let's get back to the story. Give thanks. I'm getting a little better at that. Again, we do on the other side of my health education aspect. That's what it is that I do, health education. So if you've caught some of those videos as well, shout out to you, because what good is knowing all this history if we don't have the energy and wherewithal to take care of ourselves and the next generation? One thing that should be noted from this particular generation of the Rastas in the storyline, for the most part, outside of the excessive ganja smoking, is that they were mindful of what they were putting in their body, mindful of the things that they were eating, right? The how the exercise they engaged in. We saw testimony from Judy and testimony from Bob and testimony from people who knew them that, listen, they were serious about this part of their life. And so what would it be if we don't take care of ourselves and take care of our loved ones? So that's also something that I'm passionate about, because right now the thing look how we're, and I mean, some of the sicknesses don't have to be. Some of the sicknesses don't have to be, but I'm not going to go on that soapbox right now. So definitely, yeah, that's what we do during the daytime. This is the research we do just to, contribute to the culture and thing. So anybody have anything to say, feel free to share. If not, I'm going to book you, and then we'll come back again and read a little bit more about this JAD deal and what was happening around the time that they signed on with this organization. I see everybody's quiet. So, okay, I'm going to come back. Most I bless. Everybody have a blessed night. I put all the links in the box and we will talk again.